So I'm Vanessa. Some of you know me, some of you don't. First, I'd like to thank all of you for being here. And I'd really like to thank Margaret Levy, our visionary leader, who has just been a godsend this entire year. Also my fellow fellows, because I just adore you all to pieces. And finally, my friends and or colleagues, but friends and students back in Claremont, California, because I love them. So thank you. There's a number of things that I want to discuss. So Jennifer is a psychology PhD. She's renowned internationally. I'm a political scientist, but I do look a great deal at identity formation. How do we become who we are? And how does that shape our political attitudes? And I think that there's something to be said for the fact that sexual violence and sexual assault in our lives can have a very prominent impact on our understanding of ourselves, our bodies, the world around us, and whether or not, when and where we choose to enter into it. I have some statistics that I wanted to read simply because I think that statistics are good, and I tend to be a bit more of a number person, by training at least. So these are from the CDC National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey. Right. 19.3% of women and 1.7% of men will be raped in their lifetimes. Right. So almost 20% of women and almost 2% of men are raped in their lifetimes. Of that, right, also 43.9% of women and 23.4% of men experience other forms of sexual violence. I want to be very, very clear here, right? Particularly when you're thinking about women and girls, right? You're looking at roughly 65% of the US population will be raped or victim of some type of sexual assault in their lifetimes. Of the female rape victims, 78.7% were first raped prior to age 25, and 40.4% were first raped prior to age 18. These are just the statistics. I'm going to say it again just in case you forgot. 78.7% of women, female rape victims, were first raped prior to age 25. And 40.4% of female rape victims were first raped prior to age 18. All right. This is drastically shaping how we see and interact with the world around us. I make no mistake. It's an epidemic, so to speak. This is a public health issue. It is not simply a crime issue. It is a public health issue. It is killing us, slowly, quickly, but it's killing us. It is taking everything out of ourselves just to function in this world and to try to make it a better place. Sorry. So, this year I've been working with Estelle, Elizabeth, and Jennifer. And one thing we did together was that we had the opportunity to watch Christine Blasey Ford testify here at Caspis, not in Washington, D.C. And we all had varying reactions to it, but it kind of focused around a dynamic of empathy. Right? That as she shook, we shook with her. As she told her story, we felt the pain that she so visibly demonstrated. And so I've been playing around with this idea that as survivors, perhaps, one of the dynamics that we're experiencing is this kind of empathetic absorption. Right? It's not simply a fatigue. It's understanding the weight that someone else carries. Because maybe in our lives, at some point, one place or another, we've carried that weight too, right? So when we hear someone else's story, there's a beauty in it in the sense that you're not alone. And I think that most survivors suffer from this, this isolation of feeling that, that we're alone, that no one will ever believe us, that no one will ever, love us again. And yet we have this empathetic absorption because we see her bravery, we see her strength, we see her vulnerability. and we recognize it, and maybe perhaps it helps us to see it in ourselves. The second thing I'd like to talk about is this idea that I'm working through that will hopefully either be a chapter in a book or a journal article, which is this idea of compounded vulnerabilities and cumulative inequality. Right, so I'm kind of going through, from different disciplines, but with trying to develop an understanding of the ways in which the different types of vulnerabilities may affect us. Particularly, should we choose to come forward? Not only that, but just in terms of whether or not a predator, sees us as easy prey, for lack of a better term, right? So compounded vulnerabilities, for those of you who have studied feminism, for those of you who have studied Black feminism, critical race theory, there's this idea, we talk a great amount about intersectionality, right? These intersections of race, of gender, of class, of sexual orientation, of gender identity, of disability, that all of these different identities, for lack of a better term, intersect with each other, right, at different times, and they create unique experiences that we all need to navigate as we make our way through the world. So for me, compounded vulnerabilities has to do, extrapolating from intersectionality, this idea that we're each we each suffer from these unique vulnerabilities. Right? It may be race, it may be class, it may be sexual orientation, it may be your gender identity, it may be your ethnic background, it may be within a dynamic within your religious practice, it could be that you are disabled, right? All of these are vulnerabilities that may lead someone else to identify you as easy prey, as a target, because you can't fight back, or because you may lack the kind of credibility that comes up so often in the Me Too movement, whether or not they choose to believe us. And I want to say this. On the topic of credibility, it deeply, deeply concerns me that some women who come forward, and some men too, because I want to make clear that, men and boys are victims of rape as well. But there's a recurring theme, at least when women come forward, that this deliberate attempt to try to undermine someone's credibility, right? And also a prioritization or a privileging of women who might come from a higher socioeconomic status. They might come from, maybe a dominant group such as white people. They may come, they may be highly educated. That seems to be a source of credibility from my vantage point. But this is credibility that I think we need to get away from and move away from, because every woman matters. Every survivor matters, regardless of their background, regardless of where they come from, right? That none of us are disposable and dispensable, that in fact we should be valued for our uniquenesses as human beings. That's what I'd like to see in the world. And so I think about sexual violence more broadly, right? And I think about our society and what we can expect, what we should be able to expect without betrayal, right? And one thing that I notice with sexual violence is that there are many people who would like to glance away from this. And maybe they would do it subconsciously, maybe they do it consciously, maybe it's just too much. And I understand it's one of the ugliest aspects of humanity, trust me. But what and who we glance away from says so much about what our priorities as a society. And it says so much about our health and our emotional well-being, right? Don't be afraid to see survivors for who they are. The beautiful parts, the ugly parts, everything in between. And know that they didn't deserve what happened to them. They have nothing to be ashamed of. And they are not alone. I want to commend Jennifer in particular. She's become my closest friend here, though I love everyone. But I think that your ideas regarding institutional courage are so incredibly profound and so unbelievably important in this time and age. I'm a college professor, right? You can take the professor out of the classroom, but you can't take the classroom out of the professor. And over the years, I've had students survive various forms of sexual violence. I think many professors in the room kind of can empathize with that, right? We want to do what's best for our students. We love our students. And we love the institutions that we're at, right, where we teach. And so I'm trying to think, along with Jennifer, about the ways that we can help our institutions become more transparent, help our institutions serve everyone, help the institutions develop courage in the sense that we want them to stand up and instead of sweep certain dynamics under the rug, right? And I know that this is kind of a recurring pattern, or at least I've seen this as a recurring pattern, and I hope that will change. And I do believe that Jennifer is one of the people who would change it. And it's just such a delight to be your friend. Thank you.
I feel the same way.